Look at me.
Sure.
Look at me.
Sure.
I'm the captain now.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. Once again, this is not Paul Caputo, but rather Dan Simon, and we're going to pick up where we left off last week and finish up our Turn the Table Takeover podcast of Baseball by Design. So right now, I'm very pleased to be joined by my very special guest, Paul Caputo. Welcome back. At one point in my life, I was looking for a collecting hobby, and I was in a store in Los Angeles, one of these shops where you can get all kinds of quirky little things, and there was a mechanical wind-up bird, and I liked it. It spoke to me, not literally, but figuratively, and I purchased it, and then I remember being in some other store and seeing a wind-up bird, and I got one of those. And I decided, hey, I'm going to start collecting wind-up birds. So I was about 3 to 4 birds into this. And I remember at one point saying to my girlfriend, it's not much of a hobby here. and that was the end of my wind-up bird collecting hobby ship. But you are obviously a known collector of either Sunday helmets or helmet Sundays. I think there are Sunday helmets.
Can I revisit this question here, Dan? Because when we posed that question, when you posed that question to me, I posted a Twitter poll asking whether I should change the name of the Helmet Sunday Hall of Fame to the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame. And you're never going to believe it, but so far, what is this, like 3 hours into this interview right now, we are at 62.5% yes, 62.5 to 37.5 yes, it should be the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame.
I don't mean to be a disruptor. Sorry if I've disrupted you, but I was just, it's the importance of syntax. So back to the ice cream helmets.
Yeah.
If that were not, and it could be not argued, but you have a lot of dad hats. I don't know if that constitutes a collection, but
yeah. That's a good question, because I have a lot of t-shirts too. And I don't know if I collect t-shirts or if I just have a lot of t-shirts. Or as John Hodgman famously says, the line between a hoarder and a collector is a display case. And so, maybe I just need to display my t-shirts and then it's a collection.
Most of your helmets, I know you received some from listeners of yours and Twitter followers of yours, and other people in the sports branding and the Sunday helmet community. But a lot of them, perhaps most, have come from your actual consumption of a helmet Sunday at minor league and I'm sure Major League Baseball games.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any memorable ice cream helmet Sunday experience or experiences?
Okay, so I have a couple for sort of different reasons. The Akron Rubber Ducks, I just remember, and they were just selling Cleveland helmets. They didn't even sell their own helmet, except unless you got like the Screamer, which is what they call their their full-sized helmet that has like 2 bananas and 21 scoops of ice cream and like a million different things that you can't possibly eat except with like a team of 7 people. But they served this like really delicious ice cream, and it's some of the best ice cream that I've had at a baseball game. Salt Lake Bees also massive serving of scooped ice cream that is just really, it was delicious, really good ice cream. I went to a Texas Rangers game in their old stadium that is now gone, I guess, and
it was actually, I'm not mistaken, it's not gone. It's still there, and they're using it for things, including football. Okay. I think, I could be wrong about that. We'll ask Anna DiTomaso about that.
That's a good question for Anna DiTomaso. But the funny thing was, so I was at the old Ranger Stadium, and it was 10 o'clock at night, and I was sort of unfamiliar with this kind of heat in the world, that it could exist this way, that it could be like 95 degrees at 10 o'clock at night somewhere. And so we were partway into this game. It was pretty late in the game, and I went and I got myself an ice cream helmet because it was it was an American League game. I was going slow. It was 10 o'clock at night, and it was still like the 6th or 7th inning. And I went and I got myself a helmet, and I'm walking back to my seat, and the helmet is just like dripping in my hands, like it just in the short walk back to my seat, that it was just melting just very quickly. And I had to sit there and just like sort of work it while I was, in the, on the concourse there, because I wasn't going to actually make it back to my seat. And so by the time I actually got back to my seat with it, it was still the 7th inning and it was basically soup.
Well, I was just going to say, so in an ice cream helmet, you can have scooped ice cream, I suppose. You can have soft serve swirled ice cream, and you can have ice cream soup, which you have there in Texas.
And I'm not trying to yuck anyone's yum or gatekeep people's confections at baseball games, but I'm not a huge fan of Dippin' Dots. It's not really my thing. But
well, if you were a food service manager at a ballpark,
oh yeah,
what would be the Paul Caputo helmet sundae? One that you haven't had before, but if you can craft one, what would be the Paul Caputo helmet sundae?
All right, I have strong feelings about this actually. So I love frozen custard over soft serve ice cream, even over hard scooped ice cream, because the soft serve holds the toppings better, and then frozen custard is just objectively better than soft serve ice cream. But here's the secret. And this is something my children and I discovered at the Rockies self-serve frozen yogurt stand out on the left field concourse. The secret, in my mind, is you, at the self-serve bar, you put the toppings in first, you do a layer of ice cream, some more toppings, a little more ice cream, and then the final toppings. So you layer the toppings and the ice cream in there, starting with the toppings. And that way, you've got toppings all the way down.
Wow, starting with the toppings, how anti-establishment of you.
Exactly. Yeah. It's sort of a bohemian approach to ice cream helmets for sure. And then that can be whatever, right? I happen to like the crushed Oreos. I love chocolate jimmies and chocolate sauce. To me, like if I'm having ice cream, I just want it to be as chocolatey as possible. That's my thing when it comes to ice cream. So, but it's more the technique of whatever you're going to put on your ice cream, start with the toppings.
Now, as a collector of these helmets,
this
is something I've always wondered about. As I have been sitting with you on our Zoom calls and seeing the helmets in the background, I see all these helmets lined up.
Yeah.
And I remember I mentioned I was born in the Bronx, grew up in Queens, then I lived in suburban New Jersey. And when I was of drinking age, I remember going into New York City, and I had friends of mine who loved going to a famous place in New York City called McSorley's Old Ale House. Have you ever heard of McSorley's?
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, it's a famous place in New York City. It's a bar where they serve McSorley's Ale, and that's what you order there. If they have other beers, maybe now they do, but back then you just got McSorley's Ale. But I remember above the bar, there was like this, I don't know if it was wire or whatever. There was something on which they had wishbones. And there were a whole bunch of wishbones, and they were caked with dust. Like there was half an inch of dust on top of these wishbones, which meant they had been up there a long, long time. And I look at those ice cream helmets on your shelves, and I wonder, you've got over 400 of them, and it's not like dusting a shelf or something like that, because you've got all these helmets stacked on top of each other.
Yeah.
Do you dust those? How do you keep them clean? Do you have a crew that comes in and does that for you?
I don't have a crew. No, we don't have. We aren't staffed up yet. It's all docents and volunteers at the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame, Helmet Sunday Hall of Fame. A live update, by the way. We're at it's now down to 59.1%. Yes, but still,
silent. Maybe that's a silent majority kind of weighing in now that they've heard the vocal minority. Maybe
they're watching Jake Tapper on CNN with the map of the United States, point out who prefers which, but. When they get dusted is when they get rearranged, which is more often than you would think, because when I add a new one to the stack, it often causes me to have to rearrange like that sort of subsection. So, because I'll often, I'll add one, if I add a new Toledo Mud Hens helmet and I already have 2 Toledo Mud Hens helmets, I try to keep them together on the collection. And so I often have to rearrange the whole sort of AAA section when I do that. So more often than not, that is happening when I am rearranging my helmets. That's how I dust them.
Well, this is all fascinating, at least to me, and we can dive even deeper into Sunday helmets. For instance, I could ask you what do you use to dust them? Are we talking Swiffers? Are we talking feather dusters? But we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. Instead, I think this is a good time to bring in a very special guest into our podcast, somebody who all of the Baseball by Design listeners know very well. One of my favorite guests that you have. I love every time she's on. I would like to bring in Ranger Amy. By any chance, is that possible?
You're going to be shocked to learn this, but I'm actually recording live. I'm not in the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in Fort Collins, Colorado, in my basement. I am in the kitchen of Baseball by Design wildlife consultant Ranger Amy Burnett.
Hi, Dan.
Welcome to my Turn the Tables Takeover podcast of Baseball by Design. As I just said, I love your love every time you've come in. You and Paul have a great repartee. Your knowledge of animals seems to be boundless. Let's learn. You've been on many times. The listeners know you, but as they did not necessarily know all the things they now know about Paul, we know very little about you. So let's at least get into that a little bit. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
Oh my gosh, I didn't think you were going to be asking me all this.
Yeah.
I thought this was about Paul. Well, first, it's really great to meet you, even though virtually. I hope to get to catch a baseball game with you sometime with Paul and your wife. That would be super fun.
I'd enjoy that very much.
I would like that. So I am originally from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, so right on the seacoast. So Paul and I both grew up on the shore, so we have that in common.
So being in New Hampshire, that sort of constitutes, as far as I understand, the greater Red Sox Nation area. Were you a baseball fan growing up?
So I grew up a Red Sox fan, but mostly because my dad would let us stay up late if we watched the baseball game with him. So I like to stay up late, kind of a night owl. So I stayed up with my dad and we'd watch the baseball games together. So that's kind of how I grew a love of baseball. And so I associate baseball with just happy things. It's sort of like it's my happy place, really. I'm not really as attuned to the statistics and parts of the game as a lot of baseball fans, but I really, really enjoy the games. And that's where I got my love. But Paul will tell you that I really, one of the first times that Paul and I had a conversation about baseball, I think I called it runs points.
What you described, what you love so much about it being like your happy place, that's what Paul was saying earlier. I was asking him where his love for baseball came from and what it was for him. And frankly, for so many people is it's time spent with family. It's time spent with friends. Now,
yes,
anytime you go to a game, I shouldn't say anytime you can go to a game by yourself, but most of the time it's with other people, and it's family, friends, and the overall community. And so it's not so much, I love delving into, although for some people it is delving into batting averages and how many home runs this guy hit and all of that. It's just those experiences you share, and they're normally pleasant ones. And one of the reasons for that is baseball has all these, these other sports are great, but in basketball, it's almost constant action. Hockey, it's almost constant action. Even though in football, it's stop and go, there's more action. Whereas in baseball, there's a lot of time in between where you can talk to each other, where you can point things out, it doesn't even have to be about the game. It's just talking to people. It's a great setting, whether you're at home on the couch, watching it with your dad, like you mentioned, or whether you're at the game, watching it with Paul. It's a time to just be with somebody and enjoy spending that time at a really, slow, pleasurable pace. So,
yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. I mean, I just love the fact that it's not, for the most part, it's not like, can't talk. We have to watch this. There's a lot of, just sitting there and taking it in and a lot of conversations that you might not have had I love the baseball game for that. You know, it's just, you can get a little further into conversations. You're having that relaxing time. Almost like, you know, kind of, I think that's probably why I like beer too, because not only do I enjoy the taste of beer, but you can just sort of linger over a beer, and you get together for the excuse of having a beer, but really you just want to spend time with people. And that for me is the same about a baseball game.
Well, what you just described, you're when you go to a ball game, you're not having a beer, you're sharing a beer.
Oh, I like that idea. Yes.
I'm glad you enjoy baseball, and what I enjoy is the way you take what you do for a living and you intertwine that with baseball. So let's hear a little bit about. We know you as Ranger Amy. We know you're a Ranger. What do you do on, what's a day like for you? What do you do for your job? What is being a Ranger? And how did you get into that? That's not, people who become accountants, they become salespeople, they become athletes, whatever. I personally don't know a lot of people who became Rangers, so this is very interesting to me. And I have to admit, I don't know a lot about it. So inform us.
Sure. Well, I didn't know what I wanted to be for a while. I actually got my degree in environmental studies before I decided to be a Ranger, and someone just said, "Hey, have you ever thought about being a Ranger?" And I said, "No, tell me more." And turns out I'd been to national parks and seen park rangers, of course, before give talks. And so I thought, hey, that might be a great opportunity for me. I basically just wanted to talk to people about animals, and I didn't know there was a job you could do. And that's basically how I got into being a Ranger. And I just loved it. My first job was on the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina, and so I would walk around the campground, invite people to the campfire program with a snake wrapped around my hat and my Smokey the Bear hat. And every once in a while I'd forget it was up there, and the snake would sort of poke its head out because it was pretty mellow, and it scared people. But I just always loved just bringing that human. I don't like to anthropomorphize animals to the point where people stop seeing them as animals, but I do like to point out the similarities, and I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Animals are very relatable, and when you relate animals to people, vice versa, then people understand them and enjoy them, even if it's a venomous or poisonous animal. And if you can help them relate, then somehow they're less scary. So that's kind of my favorite thing to do. I kind of went off the rails on your question.
Well, you answered it perfectly. You didn't go off the rails. That's what I was hoping for. Explaining to us what you do, why you do it, and how you got to do it. So thank you for that. And that's actually a perfect segue into why you are here when you're talking about relating animals to people and vice versa. And you talk about how that particular animal, how its particular traits, qualities, characteristics lend themselves well to certain aspects of the game of baseball: running, jumping, teamwork, etc. So what we're going to do, being that this is the Turn the Tables episode of the Baseball by Design podcast, we're going to turn that around. Our animal today is Paul Caputo. So
I'm laughing because Paul has no idea, and you and I have talked a little bit over email, and he has no idea that we were conspiring. So he just rolled his eyes and laughed, and I'm laughing too.
So tell us what traits about Paul, and I use the word traits, and if you come up with a better word, I appreciate that. And I've also said qualities and characteristics. What about Paul reminds you of or is consistent with particular animals? For example, as we're doing here with Paul, and Paul likes to do in his podcast, we're digging deep, okay? And so I think about, well, that makes me immediately think of groundhogs or moles or something else. So along those lines, without giving you, I could give you other examples, and maybe I will, depending on what your answer or answers end up being. Tell us about Paul through animals, or animals through Paul.
All right, that's a great start. So definitely Paul is a type of fossorial animal. A fossorial animal is one that likes to dig and to dig deep. So Paul would definitely be a type of fossorial animal, such as the ones you just mentioned, like a mole rat or a groundhog. But I actually am going to say that Paul is more like a badger. And even though you might think of badgers as having a bad temper, the qualities that are like Paul, badgers have, is that they're persistent. They basically they can go after what they want, and they usually get it. So they're persistent. They don't give up easily. They do dig really deep. So that's they live mostly underground. Come up when they're hungry and need some food. So Paul kind of lives in the basement when he's doing podcasting, and he comes up for ice cream. So there you go. Paul is like a badger in that way.
Paul the badger. Okay. Do continue then, please.
So Paul is a little bit like an orangutan because he's kind of hairy and orange. He's got a beard and he's kind of furry and orange. But the characteristics of an orangutan, they're pretty mellow when it comes to their demeanor. So Paul he's not upset very easily, which makes him kind of fun to hang around. And he's deliberate. So like an orangutan, they are also ingenious and they are persistent. So I would say that Paul is kind of like an orangutan in that way.
Well, let me ask you then, as far as other qualities or characteristics of orangutans that I've noticed, there's this movie with Clint Eastwood. Actually, it was at least 2 or maybe more movies, but Every Which Way But Loose, where his co-star in the movie is an orangutan. And so and you can get them to do, and I remember the orangutan in that movie with Clint Eastwood, Every Which Way But Loose, was named Clyde. And Clyde, you watch this movie and Clint Eastwood tells him to do something and he does it. Not ordering him, but like Clyde punches people, I think. So they're highly trainable animals. Is Paul highly trainable?
It's a good question. I would say he's pretty trainable.
So are there animals who collect considerable quantities of similar objects, like his ice cream helmets and dad hats? An animal especially known for its gathering? Is there some parallel there between Paul and a particular animal?
There is. I'm having so much fun at this. I don't know if you know, but I'm just like watching Paul's expressions as he's listening to the answers. So Paul's a little bit like a pack rat because he does like to gather things, especially shiny things. Now, these helmet sundaes are not necessarily shiny, but to Paul, they're pretty shiny because Paul's like, "Ooh, I don't have this one. I need to collect that one." And so, of course, he's slowly collected more than 400 helmets sundaes now.
400,
Yeah, more than 400. So yeah, a little bit like a pack rat. He sees something, he's like, "Ooh, I want to have that in my collection." And so he's got quite a pack rat midden, as they would say, of helmet sundaes.
I'm sure we've all heard of pack rats, usually referring to people. Is a pack rat actually a type of rat?
It is, yes.
Okay.
It's a white-footed wood rat, and it lives and particularly in the Southwest deserts. So I actually have some in my backyard. I've trapped a few over the years. I help out friends who need them trapped and remove them and let them go.
Well, I hope Paul the pack rat came willingly and was not trapped.
I did not trap and relocate Paul. So, if he started collecting things and putting them in a mound at my house, then I might have something to say about it. But so far, he has not shown that a tendency to collect things other than the helmet sundaes and maybe a few plastic cups from different baseball games that we've been to over the years.
Okay. Now, prior to this podcast, I got a text from Paul informing me that you guys were going out for a run and letting me know that you would be back by this time, our prearranged scheduled time. So we know Paul's a runner. I believe this has come up in the podcast before, so I don't think this is news to you Baseball by Design podcast listeners. Paul's a runner. He covers great distances. Are there particular animals known for doing the same?
So yes, so if you're looking at a long distance runner, so Paul's not really a sprinter. I would say he's more of an endurance runner. As far as distance, I would liken him probably to a zebra if we were over in Africa, or if you were in the Southwest desert area, or in Arizona rather, I would say he's kind of like a pronghorn, because they're known to be able to travel long distances. They're great runners. They get up to speeds about 35 miles an hour. Probably faster than, a lot faster than Paul can run, a lot faster than even the fastest runner in the world could run. But I think that he's got that endurance and distance running. He's got that talent that way. So maybe like a American pronghorn, or if we were over in Africa, I would liken him to a zebra.
Okay, I didn't know that. Obviously, we all know of zebras because they're one of the most unique animals with regard to their stripes. But I didn't know, they're like, I guess they're part of the equine family, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so they, so like a horse, we know horses can run and travel great distances. So I guess it makes sense that zebras do, but I never really thought of them in that way. I just think of them as one of the coolest looking animals. I didn't know they're known for traveling great distances. So just like when I do research into a particular theme for an identity I'm doing where I learned something I didn't know. Thank you for informing us, and me in particular, about zebras and their ability to travel distances. Okay, well, that's the end of my list of leading questions, meaning here's things I've thought of, but I don't know animals like you do. Was there anything else you thought of that might pertain to Paul?
Well, first I started with characteristics of Paul, and then I went to animals from there. So I kind of went backwards. I thought, what are the characteristics that I think of with Paul? And then I thought of the animals that sort of matched up. So I have a couple other ones I'd love to share and embarrass Paul with.
Maybe it's something he'll be happy to hear about.
Okay, I think so. Now that I've called a pack rat and an orangutan, but actually orangutans are one of the smartest monkeys. So they share most of our DNA. Actually, they're more related to us than the chimps are. But back to Paul. So Paul really likes road trips, and he likes to travel long distances, especially to get what he wants, which in this case, of course, is baseball and helmet Sundays. But if we call that food, in general, an animal that travels long distances to find food would be the sea turtle. One of the cool things about sea turtles is that not only do they roam long distances, but they return to the same beach that they were born at. Year after year. So one of the things that Paul likes to do is return to the Jersey Shore every year, and and he loves doing that to be with his family. So he's kind of like a sea turtle and roams all these far distances. He's the one in the family that roamed all the way to Colorado, but then he always goes back to the shore in the summertime, the beach that he loves.
Ocean City, New Jersey.
Ocean City, New Jersey. And then so Paul likes to talk a lot. I don't know if you know that.
No. Are we talking about the same Paul Caputo?
He likes to talk a lot, and he's pretty gregarious. So he likes to hang out with a few close friends and chat. So the one animal that I found that sounds a little bit like Paul is actually called the jungle babbler. I think it's a new nickname for Paul.
The jungle babbler.
the jungle babbler. And it is a bird that lives in India. And this particular bird likes to hang out with groups of like 6 to 10. So not like a huge flock of birds, just like 6 to 10 different birds. And he'll just hang out. They'll just hang out together. And what I thought of when I looked at this bird, the jungle babbler, is it's perfect because Paul loves to hang out with his baseball palooza guys, and there's usually like 6 to 10 guys in this in a small group of his friends, and so he's a little bit like a jungle babbler.
Well, I have experienced that both on the podcast and in person. I went to a game here in Louisville with the Baseball Palooza crew, and the whole crew likes. Well, I shouldn't say everyone, because some of them were quieter than others, but there was no end to the banter from the first pitch to the last. And speaking of Louisville, Paul and I talked earlier about what we were wearing. Ranger Amy is wearing a Louisville Slugger t-shirt. Louisville Slugger is where Louisville Sluggers are made. And here in Louisville is the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory, where they don't make all of their wood bats, but they do make their major league professional bats. And in front of the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory is the world's largest baseball bat. I have to apologize to Louisville Slugger. I couldn't tell you how many stories high it is, but it's higher than the building. And
That's really cool.
it's a local landmark. So one of the
neat.
things Louisville's famous for.
Yes.
Ranger Amy, it was great meeting you.
Nice to
I've
meet
heard you, but now I get to meet you at least virtually via Zoom. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for your insight with regard to Paul and how his part in the animal kingdom. So thank you so much for being a guest on Dan Simon's Turn the Table Takeover of the Baseball by Design podcast.
I had a lot of fun. Thanks so much, Dan.
Guys, welcome back to Baseball by Design, where I, Dan Simon, have turned the tables and am interviewing Paul. And right now we're going to go to a lightning round. Now, this is a lightning round by title, not necessarily in actuality. Paul, if you wish to elaborate on any of these things, you certainly can. But these are some baseball and some non-baseball questions. So
I'm ready.
We've already established that your favorite player was Manny Trio, and you also liked Mike Schmidt. Do you have a favorite under the radar player? It doesn't necessarily have to be a Philly, somebody who's not somebody that immediately comes to mind. And I'll actually say Manny Trio, you're the first person I know who that was his favorite player. Very good player, an all-star, an important part of the Phillies team. He certainly wasn't a bench rider or somebody who just had a cup of coffee, but is there a particular player or players that perhaps even on another team that wouldn't be, the Mickey Mantles, the Aaron Judges, the Mike Trouts, that you might have really liked as a fan?
Well, I liked Shake and Bake McBride on those Phillies teams. The expression, I'm sure you've heard it applied to other players, where they said that 2/3 of the earth is covered by water and the other third was covered by Bake McBride.
Yep.
Loved that. Loved Von Hayes. I loved his base stealing acumen. He was always fun to watch. On another team, I've always been a huge fan of Sean Doolittle, just in terms of sort of what he does in the community and for his teams. Sean Doolittle is a guy I've always enjoyed following in that regard. Okay,
this next question requires I'm going to try to make this quick, a little a lead up to this question.
Okay.
Here in Louisville, in addition to being the site of the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory, and also the birthplace of Muhammad Ali, it's also known for a very famous horse race, the Kentucky Derby. And I attended a Kentucky Derby, my first Kentucky Derby, where we were going with people who got us VIP access during the Kentucky Derby, where we got fed. We ate and drank like kings and queens. And by the end of, going to the Derby, it's not just one race, it's a full racing day. So by the end of the day, we were stuffed, and we had been, when it comes to our drinks, we were overserved, and we could not eat another bite or drink another drop. However, we had arranged to meet with friends who were also at the Kentucky Derby, but not with us at that Kentucky Derby, but not with us in this VIP area. And we agreed to meet with them for dinner afterwards. So when we got to that restaurant, we were there with these friends who were there with their entire family, father, mother, sister, brother, and other families, a big group of people. And they had already been there for a while. They already had their dinners. There were multiple bottles of wine on the table. We ordered a side salad and nothing to drink. We drank water. But when we were done eating, and the Bills came, their family just decided to divide up the tab.
Yeah.
And it was not equitable based on what we ended up spending hundreds of dollars for side salads.
Yeah.
And we were having a discussion shortly thereafter. This is a discussion people in Louisville, due to the horse racing we're famous for.
Yeah.
We have, it's like, what if we had a racehorse, what would we name it? And the people who we were there at the Kentucky Derby with, who we then met, these other friends, laughed like they knew right away. And they said, my racehorse should be called, by the way, it was the Miller family. And he said, my racehorse should be called Mr. Miller's Tab. So that, if I ever have a racehorse, that's the name of my first racehorse. So with that story being told, if you had a racehorse, what would you name it?
So probably that racehorse would be somewhat in my image. And to Ranger Amy's point, maybe I'm not the best sprinter in the world, which is, what these horse races are. So I think in many ways, my horse would probably be the opposite of Seabiscuit. And so I think the opposite of Seabiscuit might have to be Land Cookie. And so I think my horse would be Land Cookie. The other thought I have about this is obviously back in 2004, the famous Philadelphia. I mean, this was how starved we were for success in Philadelphia as a city. The whole city rallied around Smarty Jones, the racehorse that got 2/3 of the way to the Triple Crown. And so I was thinking, maybe some sort of play on Smarty Jones, Dummy Jones, something like that. I don't know. That one I'm still workshopping. So I think Land Cookie would have to be the one.
Okay, Land Cookie it is. Smarty Jones is one of my favorite names ever for a racehorse. And I was fortunate. I think I've been to at least 3, maybe 4 Kentucky Derbies.
Oh.
And I was there when Smarty Jones won his or its Kentucky Derby. So
Very
I got
cool.
to witness that in person.
The third race, by the way, the failed attempt at the Triple Crown, happened during my sister's wedding. And everyone suddenly disappeared to the hotel bar to watch this 2 minutes of racing here, and then slunk back into the wedding all disappointed when it didn't pan out.
Yeah, we love ourselves a Triple Crown. It's a great accomplishment. So in any sport, we have baseball's Triple Crown as well. Love when that happens.
Yep.
Hey, do you have a favorite baseball book?
I started reading a lot about the Negro Leagues after visiting the Negro Leagues Museum. And obviously, the Negro Leagues Museum had a strong campaign for Buck O'Neil to make it to the Hall of Fame, which ultimately paid off, but not until after Buck O'Neil passed away. And there is a book by Joe Posnanski. I hope I'm saying his name right. Joe Posnanski from Kansas City, called The Soul of Baseball, about traveling the country with Bob Kendrick, who is the president of the museum, and with Buck O'Neil, who was in his 90s at this point. And just a super touching, super interesting book that I would recommend to everybody. I also, like everyone else who has read it, I love Moneyball too. So it's hard to read that book and not love it.
Okay. What's the worst thing you have ever eaten?
The worst thing I ever ate, I didn't even realize it was the worst thing I was eating until after I was done, because it wreaked havoc on my system. I don't have food allergies, except for, it turns out, quinoa. I ate quinoa, and it basically left me doubled over in pain for about 6 hours. And I have not eaten quinoa since then. Well, actually, I actually did eat it one more time because I didn't realize it was the quinoa that did it to me. So on 2 separate occasions, I have eaten quinoa, and it basically just ended my night and left me sort of doubled over in pain. It's my only food allergy, it turns out.
Okay, I want to issue this, I don't know if this is a caveat, but to the National Quinoa Board, we are, I don't think Paul meant that as an indictment on quinoa just for him. I've had quinoa and did not suffer any allergic reaction to it. So people, if you haven't had quinoa before, I think it's probably fairly safe to try. So
it's and it's fairly innocuous in sort of how it tastes. It's just sort of like a regular grain. It might even be like a superfood. It's probably supposed to be pretty good for you. And I researched this a little afterwards. I think it was like some reaction I had to the proteins in it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's the first quinoa allergic reaction I've ever heard. So Paul, you're a unique individual for
well,
many ways, including your tolerance of quinoa. Okay. Speaking of eating, what's the best thing you have ever eaten at a minor league ballpark, non-ice cream related?
this one's easy. The green chili cheeseburger at the Albuquerque Isotopes game. It's
Okay. Shout out
it's,
to Albuquerque and the Isotopes.
yeah,
Everybody go have one. Paul recommends it highly.
I do.
Paul, both of us grew up in Wayne. You in Wayne, Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
me in Wayne, New Jersey. Coincidentally, another thing we've got in common.
How about that?
There are 8 cities in the United States named Wayne. There are 16 Wayne counties, plus a host of Waynesboroughs, Waynesburgs, Waynesvilles, not to mention a Wayne town, a Waynewood, a Wayne City, and of course, Fort Wayne, home of the Fort Wayne Tin Caps, the hat you're wearing today, and also featured in episode 48 of the Baseball by Design podcast. So that's a lot of Waynes. I think it's safe to say. So what is something unique to or special about your Wayne, Pennsylvania?
First of all of these Waynes, I presume, are named after the same General Anthony Wayne, who is the namesake for the Mad Ants, the Fort Wayne Mad Ants in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and not a good person, not a person who should be the namesake of a bunch of towns. And so that's one of the things that that has been interesting for me as I've learned about this country. Something I learned about my own Wayne, Pennsylvania, that I didn't know growing up there. Wayne, Pennsylvania is 14 miles from the city of Philadelphia. It's on the main line. It was originally called Luella, which is something I learned relatively recently because that's the name of the train station there. And so, like many places in the United States, it exists because of a train line. The Philadelphia main line is sort of like this long, straight line of, I guess, wealthy suburbs that was on the main line, the main train line that goes into Philadelphia. And so Wayne, Pennsylvania, my first job was at the Anthony Wayne movie theater, which after many, 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 many years, finally just shut down. But I remember I spent a summer there working, and the 2 movies that were playing were Turner and Hooch with Tom Hanks and Arachnophobia with John Goodman. And so there's like a half hour of each of those movies that I know practically by heart because that was my half hour lunch break. And I would go into one of those 2 movies for an entire summer and watch the same half hour of those movies. I don't know how either of them begins or ends, but I know the same half hour of each of those movies. So I don't know if that counts as a unique fact, but that's certainly my personal connection to my own Wayne.
Well, unique or otherwise, personal connection works for me. With my Wayne, New Jersey, also named after Anthony Wayne. We had an Anthony Wayne Junior High School, and our claim to fame is I moved to Wayne, New Jersey in 1969. Wayne, New Jersey was the 1970 Little League World Champions. World Champions, Wayne, New Jersey.
Wow.
Now, speaking of Little League, tell us a memorable Little League moment for yourself. You as a Little League player.
So I used to, when I was too young to play Little League, I watched my older brother. He's 2.5 years older than me. And I was just champing at the bit to get out there, right? Like I just absolutely wanted to play. And I was born in August. The cutoff for playing was September. And so my parents actually went to this Little League and lied to them about my age. They said I was born September 6th, not August 6th, because they wanted me to be able to play a year sooner than I otherwise would have been eligible. And what happened was I kept advancing, you would either advance or you'd be held back a year. I kept advancing to the next level, but I was always the smallest kid on the team. And I was never much of a standout player, in part, I feel because maybe I was younger, until finally I had aged out and my parents went back to them and they were like, you know what? Paul was actually born August 6th, not September 6th. And so he's technically, eligible for one more year. And this Little League was so desperate for players. They were like, oh, okay, great. Well, let's have Paul come back and play another year. And then I was like the same size as all the other kids on the team. And I actually made the all-star team that year. And we went to extra innings against the evil. We were the Wayne kids. They were the Ithan kids. And, we played them in Little League. And it was supposed to be a 7-inning game. It ended up being a 9-inning game because it went to extras. I hit a leadoff double and scored the winning run in the 9th inning. That also happened on the same night that my parents took us out to Pizza Hut. We went to Pizza Hut afterwards to celebrate. And my parents realized that they were supposed to have seen a report card that they hadn't seen yet from my middle school. And it was because I had gotten it and had some grades I wasn't super thrilled about, and I hid it in my locker room. So the glory of hitting the leadoff double that ended up being the winning run in the All-Star game in my last year of Little League quickly turned to disaster when later that night my parents realized they had not seen the report card that they were expecting to see from me. So
the celebratory period was short-lived.
It certainly was. It certainly was.
Okay. But at least you got your Pizza Hut in before that.
Yeah. Although I think it was like right after the salad bar. It was before the pizza actually got there. So it was between the salad bar and the pizza that this happened.
Well, let me point out something Paul just did there. God bless you, Paul. Paul used the expression champing at the bit. This is a bone of contention for me.
Peccadillo.
Okay. That expression, Paul used the correct expression. It was originally champing at the bit. Through popular misuse, the great majority of the people now say chomping at the bit, which makes sense because, a bit is speaking of racehorses, what we would name our a racehorse if we were racehorse owners. There's a bit in its mouth. That's what holds the reins or the straps that become the reins. And you would think of the horse chomping on that bit that's in the back of its mouth. But I don't know why. I don't really know what the word champing means, but the original phrase is champing at the bit. So thank you so much for using that.
You're welcome. And champing, I actually looked this up once. Champing actually is sort of it's similar to chomping. It's more of a grinding than it is like a sort of up and down like chomping would be. So it still involves teeth, and it still involves sort of the grinding of teeth, but it's a slightly different phrase. So
I actually thank you for educating me and your listeners on that. Now, hey, guys and gals listening to this podcast, that's the kind of information that will make you a big hit at parties.
Totally.
So, totally. Share that. You'll have a crowd gather around you like you've never experienced before.
People love esoteric grammar rules, and they love being corrected. So
it's only second to speaking about ligatures.
Okay. Ligatures next week with Todd Radom is my ligatures episode.
Ready for this one? Eggs, sunny side up, over easy, scrambled, or poached.
Oh, I don't order any of them that way. I order them over medium. So I guess that's
crazy.
Over medium.
No, there was an over medium.
Over medium is how I order my eggs. If I'm at Uncle Bill's Pancake House in Ocean City, New Jersey, over medium, please. Okay.
You talk about ordering off the menu, not off the menu, off the board.
They've never batted an eye, they
I guess it's a thing, but
yeah.
I can tell you, I've never been to breakfast with somebody who has ordered over medium. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I thought I was covering the entire offerings of how to cook eggs. So you've opened our eyes once again. Okay, your jersey number of choice and why?
4. It was my jersey number all through Little League. And then it was the jersey number of a player who I liked very much at the time and did not realize until later that he was a despicable person. But I was a big Lenny Dykstra fan when he was on the Phillies.
Well, he was one of my favorite players too. Yeah. Like, how can you Nails? That's Nails. His nickname. And he always he was always dirty. And if it wasn't because of the dirt on the from sliding and diving, it was because of the gigantic chaw of chewing tobacco he had in his mouth that would dribble down the front of his jersey. Right. So he played baseball the way you would like to see baseball played. Didn't necessarily live life the way life was supposed to be lived. He actually spent time in jail after his career for one indiscretion or another.
Yeah. And wrapped his car around a tree in a drunk driving incident not too far from where I grew up.
There you go. So speaking of living life the way it should be lived, do you make your bed in the morning?
No.
Okay, you don't live life the way it should be. Well, maybe you do, but okay. Okay. Minor League Baseball recognizes the best promotions of the season each year with something they call the Golden Bobblehead Awards. So, with the understanding that that name's already taken, what would you name the award if one was given out to the best new brand identity of the year?
This one, this is going to sound maybe sort of trite or maybe too easy, but it's both a delicious drink and now a great award, the Brandies.
Okay, I like that. Okay. Tell us something you hate doing.
Making my bed.
Okay, who knew this would come up twice in 3 questions? Okay. Okay, did you ever dress as a sports figure for Halloween?
Yes. I went as John Kruk in 1993.
Did you have a mullet?
Had
Did
a
you have
mullet.
a belly?
I stuffed a pillow under a Phillies jersey. Yeah. So I wore sort of a full Phillies uniform. And then like just sort of scruffed myself up and, went full sort of like dirty John Kruk, basically.
Okay. The way we're describing John Kruk, he did not look like a prototypical baseball player. And famously, one day he and his teammates were walking through the airport, and a lady stopped them and stopped him and said something, realized that these were the Philadelphia Phillies or a baseball team. And she looked at him and she said to him, you don't look like an athlete. And she said, lady, we're not athletes, we're baseball players.
He also wore a t-shirt on David Letterman's show once after he had a successful operation for testicular cancer. He wore a t-shirt that said, if you don't like how I play, I'll take my ball and go home.
So he certainly worthy of you choosing him as your costume for Halloween. Okay. What is a baseball unwritten rule you think is ridiculous? Okay.
Or don't bunt during a no-hitter. I get on base, break up the no-hitter.
Okay. When I joined Paul and his Baseball Palooza friends for a game here in Louisville, Kentucky, one of the friends, and you might remember which one it was, so give a shout out to him if you recall who it was wearing a t-shirt referring to the Oxford comma. Do you remember who that friend was?
Yes, my friend Jeremy, yes.
Okay, Jeremy, this one's for you. What the Oxford comma is, for those of you who are not otherwise familiar with it, as I learned in school, if you had, for instance, 3 things in a sentence, talking about what I love about baseball, I love the food, comma, the excitement, and the ice cream. Okay. I learned there's not a comma before the and. An Oxford comma is a comma that's put in before the end.
Yeah.
The and. So Paul, Oxford comma, yes or no?
Yes, definitely. Serial comma, Oxford comma, call it what you like. It adds clarity. I'm a great believer in the clarity. This is the Chicago manual, not the Associated Press manual. I think the Chicago manual style is about clarity of language. I think the Associated Press style is about saving ink.
Okay. And Paul, in addition to his daytime job, is a professional writer. So if Paul says Oxford comma, yes. And if he says champing at the bit, listen to Paul. He knows of what he speaks.
Also 1 space after a period, not 2.
Well, that comes from typewriters. Now that we no longer use typewriters, yes, no longer 1 space, but for some reason you put 2 spaces when typing with a analog typewriter, if that's what it's called.
The monospacing was for, this.
Right. Okay. Your favorite character from The Sandlot?
Dan, this is I'm going to whisper this because I don't know, like, if people are listening to this in such a way that they're being heard, elsewhere. I think The Sandlot is overrated, and I've only seen it once. I couldn't, with the exception of knowing that there was a "You're killing me, Smalls" quote, I couldn't name a character except for, I guess, the dog in The Sandlot.
Okay. You know what? At some point, maybe when we do part 2 or the return to the Turn the Tables podcast, we'll delve deeper into that. But this is the lightning round. So for now, we move on to this. Other than Sunday helmets, what is something very important to you that is not necessarily important to most others?
The Oxford comma is one space after a period rather than two. Something that is very important to me, fonts. I think, and this might be just a thing that, maybe we as designers appreciate in ways that others don't, but like anyone using Comic Sans in any professional situation, the fact that the movie Avatar had a $4 billion budget and they basically used papyrus for their logo. This is the choice of fonts, the use of, default fonts in professional situations is something that annoys me in a way that probably doesn't other people.
Well, it does other people, probably not most others, and that's how I asked the question that isn't important to most others, but it is of paramount importance to me. And in addition to papyrus and Comic Sans, let me add brush script.
Brush script.
Don't. Okay,
I just saw brush script somewhere. I was just looking at something that had brush script on it.
And we'll continue seeing it, and we
Yeah.
should. It's a light on typesetting, type choice, the type choice landscape.
Yeah.
Paul, who is a player not in the Baseball Hall of Fame who you think should be?
Pete Rose, Shoeless Joe, and Barry Bonds. It's a museum. It's supposed to be telling the story. I get that it's also an honor to be in there, but it's ridiculous to me that the Hall of Fame does not have those players in them. Put those players in, tell their story, tell the story of the gambling and the steroids and the cheating, and make it part of the fact that they're in the Hall of Fame. But the fact that the home run king, the hit king, obviously Shoeless Joe was an important figure in that era. Like they should all be in the Hall of Fame, and we should just tell the story. Okay.
That's another thing that we can add to the topics for the follow-up to this one. Okay, what is something people would be surprised to know about you?
One time, I juggled on a street corner in France with a hat in front of me long enough to earn enough money to go parasailing.
That is very specific and very wonderful. I did not expect an answer as good as that. So, but we should end there. But you know what? I've got 3 more questions. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
If you can go back in time and change any moment in baseball history,
Joe Carter.
What would it? Okay, there you go. I know what you're referring to. I'm sure a lot of your listeners do. For those who might not, tell us what you're talking about.
This was the moment in Game 6 of the World Series, in a World Series that involved a game that the Phillies lost 15-14 after having a 14-8 lead at one point. Game 6 of the series, and in fact, the entire World Series ended on a walk-off home run by Joe Carter, giving the Toronto Blue Jays their 2nd consecutive World Series, and giving the Phillies and that John Kruk, Darren Daulton, Lenny Dykstra, Mickey Morandini, Mitch Williams team a heartbreaking World Series loss.
Listeners, if you have not already picked up on this, Paul's a pretty big Phillies fan. So, okay, follow me on this one.
Okay.
If you were chosen to give a commencement speech, what is something you would tell the graduates about their lives moving forward? Something that you may have learned later that you wish someone would have told you when you were at that stage of your life that those students are currently at?
I've been living my life according to an ethos the last year or so that was a purposeful change, and has proven to be something that has worked well for me, which is to say yes, to just say yes, even if sometimes you feel like saying no. And so this is like a little bit more of a serious answer. Say yes to opportunities to do things, say yes to opportunities to spend time with people, travel, even if, if you don't think maybe necessarily you have the time for it, go out, even if you think you're a little too tired to go out, to anything that is not going to violate your moral code, or, your ethics, or your, sort of standards that you have about how you live your life. Find reasons to say yes to things instead of finding reasons to say no to things.
Well, we have heard many times people say those are valuable words to live by. You put it more succinctly, and you Paul, that is a valuable word to live by. So, and that brings us to our final question. Where does the time go?
I was recently quoted in, I had some travel woes because of the weather that rolled through all of the United States, basically. And I remember I was the New York Times saw that I was tweeting about it, and one of their reporters reached out and said, "Hey, can we just call you for a quick interview?" So they interviewed me for a couple of minutes, and then they posted the story. And I remember, the New York Times in its style, they refer to people as Mr. and their last name, or Ms. and their last name. And so I was Mr. Caputo, 49. And I just looked at it and I thought, that can't be possible. So, I mean, I've been there for all of my birthdays, but I still was just like 49 of them, really? Like, that's not possible. And so, the answer is, hopefully it goes to great memories and, fun experiences that you have in your lifetime. And, that you look back on that time and think, I did some cool stuff and I saw some great places and learned some great things and met some great people.
You know what? I like what you just said there. You, in short, you what you're saying is where the time goes, it becomes our memories. So the time goes away, it disappears, but it becomes something else, and hopefully something positive, which is our memories. So that brings us to the end of this podcast. And Paul, I'm handing the reins back to you.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Thank you, Dan, for this amazing idea. This was so much fun to get the tables turned on me. And now I know how my guests feel when I interview them and spring a question on them that they're not expecting. And so this has been a lot of fun. I look forward to a 2023 full of new brands, new ballparks, more ice cream, and more appearances by both Ranger Amy, who's with me here.
And lots of fun, cool animal logos.
Lots of fun, cool animal logos, including many designed by Dan Simon himself. Dan, thank you so much. Happy New Year.
Same to you. And I can tell you there's a new animal coming in 2024 that we're going to have a great podcast about. So it's due to production lead times. These things are done more than a year in advance, but 10 months from now, I've got a doozy for you.
Amazing.
Yes.
Happy New Year.